All right, good morning. Happy Sunday, everyone. So, as you know, we're doing a sermon series this month called Fresh Start. And the idea is that I'd like you all to have a great year in 2023. And a part of making it a very successful year is getting clear on your goals for the year. So as Russell reminded us last week, I shared about my original self, and we're doing these series, actually concluding with on the 29th, the fifth Sunday of this month, we're going to have a rebrand service where we're going to showcase all the ministries that we have, and we're also going to celebrate Father and Mother Moon's birthday, along with the January birthday. So that's going to be a very big launch, kind of relaunch of our community. We're going to rent out a large space and invite everyone to join us. So you can look forward to that on the last Sunday of this month. So yeah, last week, just to remind your original self, we talked about the importance of understanding who you are. And we explored your own gifts and your passions, and we created these identity statements. I encourage you to create some kind of identity statement to help you understand who you uniquely are as an individual truth body. And the reason why we did that was to help, in order to set meaningful goals, it's really important to root those goals on a sense of self-awareness. So today, I'm going to share about God's dream and yours. And, God has had an amazing dream from the very beginning. And he has a very intentional purpose for each of us. Now, when I say purpose, it doesn't mean that God tells you exactly what to do all the time. But there's a blueprint. Like God had an intention. He does want every one of us to achieve certain aspects of our life to live most fully. So when setting goals for our lives, it's important to understand the blueprint in terms of what God hopes for us in order to align our goals to fit according to that blueprint. Then we have the best chance at living the fullest life. And we're really blessed to have the divine principle and an understanding of God's original ideal so that we can line up our goals accordingly. Also, as you know, tomorrow is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And he shared also an amazing dream that made a huge significance in the history of America, really in line with God's original dream, addressing racial inequality and really hoping for a peaceful society in America. Based on those, I hope that by the end of this sermon, you will have at least one, maybe three clear goals that you're excited about to focus on for this year. Is it okay? Yeah. All right, let's see how we do here. Okay, let's start again with the definitions. I like starting with definitions. So, dream, a cherished aspiration, ambition, or ideal. A cherished aspiration, ambition, or ideal. So, what's a famous dream that you are aware of? Any famous dreams? Kind of hinted at it before, but Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr. Okay, let's start with that one. I actually had a chance to read the whole speech yesterday. It's not very long, but it was very inspiring, and I took a few sentences that really stood out to me. So let's read. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. When this happens, all of God's children will be able to join hands and sing, "Thank God Almighty, we are free at last." So these are just some clips. There's other very powerful segments in that whole speech. But in essence, Dr. King was really striving for this equality where every human being was a son or daughter of God, and that they would be treated equally based on that. And the beauty of the message was there is a part where he shares that, yes, we need to fight for injustice or against injustice, but at the same time, we need to do so in a peaceful manner. That through the fight, we don't want to actually fall or succumb to anger and resentment. So that was what was amazing about his approach, that to achieve that, even though he was being, or they were being faced with injustice, he actually said we need to walk the high ground to achieve that goal. So this is one example of an amazing dream. Do you know of anyone else who has an amazing dream? Anyone else come to mind? All right, you looked at my sermon. Okay, so actually, Father and Mother Moon, belovedly known as our true parents, this is a message that Mother Moon gave. Actually, this was soon after Father Moon's passing. She said, "True parents set as their lives' providential goals the liberation of God, the salvation of humankind, and the realization of a peaceful, ideal world. And they have completely invested their lives for the sake of those achievements." Now, this is really an amazing dream. I mean, if you think about it, their goal was to not only save humanity, and create a peaceful world, but to liberate God. Imagine that, right? Like, to have that kind of heart, to think and connect with the suffering of God to a point where they wanted to do whatever it took to liberate the heart of God. And to me, this is like, it's mind-boggling in terms of the level of commitment. And to make it even more kind of deep is that this was within a week after Father Moon's passing. And so it was almost like Mother Moon was encouraging herself or encouraging, in one sense, comforting God at that moment, saying, you know what, I am still committed. We, Father in heaven and myself on earth, are still committed to your dream, God. And so she made this declaration to encourage our movement, encourage herself, I'm sure, and encourage God that we're still committed to making this dream a reality. So, what is God's dream? Talked about Dr. King, about our true parents' dream. What do you think is God's dream? Anyone? What is God's dream? The ideal of creation, the ideal world. Right. In simple words, it would be an ideal world or the kingdom of heaven on earth. So let's break that down a little bit. What does that mean? And also, how does that apply to me? So this is Father Moon's words. It is recorded in the Bible that after God completed each day of creation, he saw that it was good. This suggests that God wanted his creations to be object partners embodying goodness, that he might take delight in them. So, okay, it's a very simple concept, but God simply wanted, God's dream was for everything that he created to be good. Okay, simple enough. He wanted this world and all the beings living in it to be good, so that God can take delight. Let's continue. God created human beings as the final step in creating the universe. He created them in his image, in the likeness of his internal nature and external form, and gave them sensibility to all feelings and emotions because it was his intention to share joy with them. So this is straight from the divine principle, And yeah, this is amazing. It's basically saying that God created not just for us to be good, but a few key things. That human beings were created in God's image. In other words, we are kind of like mini divine beings, mini gods. Or maybe that doesn't sound too good. How about sons and daughters of God, right? So God wanted us to be like God. Also, he created us to have a relationship so that we can actually share this experience of joy with God. That was God's intention for creation. So next question I ask you is, well, how do we then bring this or share this joy with God and fulfill the reason why God created us in the first place? How do we actually do that? Okay, again, let me reiterate. If we understand these basic principles, then we can live our lives according to these principles and hence have the best chance of fulfilling our intended purpose as human beings. So fortunately, God did give us instructions in the Bible. The DP says, after their creation, God blessed Adam and Eve. These are the 3 great blessings: to be fruitful, multiply, and have dominion over the creation. So let's take a look at that. The first one is to be fruitful. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of a heads up. The reason why I'm going over these 3 great blessings is because I'm going to be guiding each of you to set goals based on these 3 great blessings. Does that make sense? Right? If this is what God intended us to do, if this is the basics, then if we set goals in each of these 3 areas, then we're actually growing into our originally intended purpose. So as I share these things one by one, I want you to think, what can I do this year to grow in these 3 areas? Okay, so I want you to pay attention, because while you're listening, I want you to think, what's one exciting goal that I can set in each of these 3 areas? So the first one is to be fruitful. So you got to think, what can I be, or what can I do this year to be more fruitful according to God's design? So in order to answer that question, we need to understand, what does it mean to be fruitful? Let's read. The key to God's first blessing is the perfection of individual character. Such individuals become the temples of God, achieve complete oneness with him, and acquire a divine nature. They experience the heart of God as if it were their own. Whew. Okay, so perfection, guys, that's it. That's all we need to work on. Be fruitful is the perfection of individual character. Become completely one in heart with God and experience God's heart as if it were their own. That way, acquiring a divine nature, okay? So again, these are kind of the ideals, but the question is, what can you do to move even one step closer to that ideal? What can you do to come one step closer to connecting in heart with God? Accordingly, when people realize God's first blessing, they become God's beloved who inspire him with joy. It's kind of like, if God is a parent, a heavenly parent, then when we reflect God's goodness, it's like a parent being proud of a child who did the right thing or who really manifested their expertise or their unique nature. A parent feels so much joy seeing that in their child. So same thing with us. When we mature our character, become more like God, then God feels joy when he sees us. And that's kind of what it means to really be fruitful. Short story, when I was in high school, I studied these principles, and yeah, for some reason, I got really inspired. I wanted to be a divine principle lecturer. And actually, at a young age, I decided, you know what? I'm going to be perfect. If the principle says that I am the Son of God and that he created me in God's image, then I am going to try to be perfect. So I actually diligently studied, and I did all kinds of conditions to really prepare myself. I remember one time I heard a message from Father Moon that you should read the Divine Principle. This is like a 510-page book at that time. As many times as you are old. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. So I decided, and I set conditions to kind of read it every day until I could catch up to my age. You know, I was serious about being perfect. So come my 21st birthday, look at myself in the mirror. No, actually, I didn't do that. But I did feel like I worked on it so much that I was kind of confident that I was pretty good. You know, I was by 21, that was my goal. And I thought that I was there. And then I got blessed in marriage and found out that there's a few more levels to go. So, it's even if it's a difficult goal, the point is to constantly work towards it. Because the more you do, the more you're really living into the potential, and actually it brings joy to your original mind. Because that's what your original mind desires, is to be and fulfill your full potential. Now, I know I'm looking at some of the faces, and I see some skepticisms in some of the eyes. So don't worry. Next week, we're going to talk about dealing with doubt, okay? Because when you strive for a goal, automatically challenges and doubt will come. But doesn't mean that those original goals are wrong. That's actually your original desire. It's just that we have so many issues that prevent us from feeling confident in reaching those goals. So next week, we're going to go into how do we deal with all those challenges and doubt that comes when striving for these original ideals. Okay. Anyway, so that was the first blessing. Second is to multiply. What does it mean when God says multiply? Well, it is the year of the rabbits. So, but some of you are not married. Okay, let's read. Adam and Eve should have joined in loving oneness as husband and wife and raised children. This would have been the fulfillment of the second blessing. When God's second blessing is fulfilled, this family or community also becomes a good object partner, giving joy to God. So when God says multiply, you know, he wanted each individual to mature in character, you know, become as close to perfect as possible, but also not just as individuals, but to create a family where that goodness is multiplied in all the relationships in that family. So when God says multiply, God means he wants you to experience this love in the family and all the relationships between husband and wife, parents and children, brothers and sisters. All of these relationships, God wants you to experience the love of God, true love, okay? And this actually resembles God's nature even more than as an individual. And that's why this second blessing is kind of the next level reflection or resemblance to God. Because as a man or as a woman, I can only reflect half of God at most. But together, as husband and wife, together as parents and children, as a family, if that comes into harmony, that represents and reflects God even more. And so that brings joy to God. So when the principle says to multiply, for those who are unable or not quite in the situation to have children, it doesn't just mean to have babies. It means to multiply God's love in each of your familial relationships. Okay? So I want you to think in terms of a goal this year. What would be an exciting goal for you to break through in a relationship that matters to you? Whether it be your parents, your spouse, your children, your siblings, what's one goal that you would be excited to break through in this year? That will help fulfill this category of multiply. And finally, have dominion. Okay, what does God mean by having dominion? Let's read. A human being contains within himself the sum total of the essences of all things. This is the reason he is called the microcosm of the cosmos. Sensing their own internal nature and external form displayed throughout the creation, they feel immense joy. Let's continue. God also delights when creation becomes his third object partner through the harmonious union of human beings and the natural world. When human beings realize God's third blessing, the entire universe becomes yet another good object partner, giving joy to God. We call this world the kingdom of heaven on earth. So, what the principle is stating here in terms of having dominion, it's not just about, naming the animals as Adam and Eve did, or going fishing, although fishing is great. It's really about having this, proper stewardship over creation, having dominion over the environment. I would say even starting with your own environment at home. Who cleaned their bed sheets this morning? All right, we got a handful. Right? Actually, it's a habit I do. Every morning, kind of clean the sheets, start the day, having one small victory. But if you want to have proper dominion over all creation, let's start in your bedroom. Let's start in your room. Is it clean? Okay. Well then, how can you have dominion over the world, over all things? You got to start with your immediate circle. And you might think, it's not a big deal. I wake up and I sleep in the same space. Why make it neat? It's going to get messy anyway. Point is, if you were designed by God to have the ability to manage all of creation, all of this world, it starts with being able to manage your own space. So if you want to live into God's expectation and hope for your potential, let's start small. Let's start with cleaning your space. And then you can expand. All things is not just animals, right? All things includes money. So who here has made a budget for your year? Oh, wow. We have one. Oh, we have three. Okay, good. I didn't do my budget yet. But actually, we're not designed by God to be poor. Let me say that again. We're not designed by God to live poor. I know some of us, we went through a lot of sacrifice. We're always giving donations. And some of us are kind of struck with the idea that poverty is the way to God. And there are verses in the Bible that kind of implies that, right? That if you're rich, it's like going through an eye of a needle to reach the heart of God. But actually, God's original plan was if our heart is already one with God, absolutely God wants to bless us with material things as well. It's just that if our heart is not aligned, then all things that we do have can be easily misused, right? That's why we have to constantly work on this first blessing, the perfection of individual character, but doesn't mean that we should be poor. In fact, I believe that if we have proper dominion and if we were constantly working on this third blessing, we would be financially abundant. Each of us, we have the potential to do that. But that starts with being able to manage your own bedroom, manage your own simple budget, live within your means. Simple concept. Don't spend more than you have. Okay? Income, expense. More income than expense. And there's some basic principles of financial management that is part of our responsibility as the third blessing. So I expect all of you to be abundant in your financial situation by consciously working on this third area, okay, of dominion over all things. Going back just one step, sorry, I forgot to mention one quick story in the second blessing. I remember after getting blessed and realizing that there's a few more levels to grow, I remember, one time dealing with my kids, and I got so frustrated. It was like insane. Like, I thought I was a patient guy until I had kids. I mean, the way they can push your buttons, it's amazing. Like, I was shocked at myself when I started yelling at my kids, and I was just like, where is this coming from, right? But the point of the relationship with the kids and the family is that you're constantly challenged and stretched to grow your unconditional heart. God designed the family to help us grow in our maturity of patience and love and keep giving, even if they don't appreciate it. Every time I, ask them, so what do you want for dinner? It's like, food. Right? So, but God's heart is always to give, even if, we're not appreciating, we don't appreciate God all the time either, right? But God still gives us, continues to love us. It's kind of like that. Family allows us to continue to grow our heart to love unconditionally. But in this area of the third blessing, I do believe part of this managing the environment, becoming financially good, is so that you can experience the beauty also of creation. Recently I had a chance, actually this morning, for those who attended morning devotion with Dr. Yong, there was a testimony that was given about a new project called Hawaii Ocean Challenge. Oh my gosh, I was like, I want to go there. It was so joyful. They had video clips of people fishing on the oceans off of Kona, Hawaii, catching these amazing fish, and the excitement and the pure joy interacting with God's creation. I mean, I was like, wow, wouldn't it be amazing if all of us could experience that? Actually, God created the oceans, the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, so that we can experience that joy. But guess what? If you're poor, you can't go to Hawaii. So, God created all these things for us to experience that joy of creation. We need to strive to really manage ourselves so that we can fully explore the beautiful, amazing creation that God gave us. It's like God put so much effort to prepare these amazing toys for us, but we're not even able to play with them, right? And I remember one time, I can't forget, my kids were still young when they actually appreciated toys. And I was on trips. I was so busy that I rarely had a chance to kind of spend time with them. But anyway, this time I was traveling, I think from Pennsylvania, and I stopped by a Cracker Barrel. And Cracker Barrel is cool because they have toys that you can get as well. So I was thinking, what would really excite my kids? So I picked out one thing for my son and one thing for my daughter. And for my son, and then I got home, and then I kind of, invited the kids over, and they were all in bags, and I said, okay, I have something for you, and they were so interested and curious. And so for my son, I bought a big box of Nerds, like this big. And then they had like little packets of Nerd boxes. And Nerds is like a candy, sweet and sour candy. And then they had this big box, right? So when I pulled out, my wife was like, what did you buy? You know, think of the cavities and all that kind of stuff. Like, what are you doing? But then I was like, no. This is to spark joy in their hearts, you know. And then when I brought that box out, my son's eyes were like, oh my God. I will never forget that reaction. But that's kind of how God feels when we interact with the amazing things of creation. When he sees us enjoy with thrill the fish of the sea or even the stars that he created, he feels tremendous joy. I remember for my daughter, I got this big pink unicorn, like this big, in this bag, and I just brought it out, and she was just like, oh my gosh. And this is the kind of joy that God feels when we can appreciate the creation that God gave to us. So really, Father and Mother Moon, they predicted that the future of the ideal world will be the hobby industry, where all we're doing is like spending time engaging with creation and doing different hobbies, because that's what God created the world in the first place for. So it's just amazing the kind of scope that Father and Mother Moon has already been thinking about. Okay, so I gave you a lot of examples in each of these three great blessings. Now it's your turn, okay? I want you to think, what are your dreams? What are your goals that you'd like to create in each of these three areas as God designed? So the first thing I want you to do is to reflect back. Remember, last week we talked about your gifts, actually 2 weeks ago, your gifts and your passions. And then last week, we talked about your identity statement. So these are all reference points, right? Your unique gifts, your unique passions, as well as your identity statements. Again, those who missed it, just tune in online, cliftonfamilychurch.org. It's recorded, about identity statements. These are all key things that you should keep in mind first. And then I want you to use these three great blessings as goal categories. So the first is be fruitful, heart for God. So what would you like to do this year that you'd be excited about that will grow your heart for God? Okay, I'll give you some examples just to help you out here, okay? So maybe it's like, what could you do? Actually, you know what? Carp just came back from a 7-day workshop. Maybe you might want to try out a 7-day retreat, a divine principle retreat, right? Maybe you want to go to a pilgrimage to Korea, to our central temple in South Korea. Maybe you want to go to Ocean Challenge, or maybe you want to just read the divine principle as many times as you are old. That may take some of you a while, but or maybe it's an EDP reading. You know, we started that whole thing last year, but maybe you're committed this year. You know what? I'm going to get to 100 times. Whatever it is, whatever is going to help you build your relationship of heart with God, that's a worthy goal this year, okay? So I want you to think about that. What can I do this year to be more fruitful and be more connected with the heart of God? What kind of experience do I want to have this year? Second, multiply, heart for people. So think about what is one relationship that you want to break through in this year. Now, don't turn to the person next to you. You can think it. But maybe it's your spouse. Maybe it's your parents. Maybe it's your siblings. Maybe it's your children. But these are each very important relationships. And if we really want to multiply the love of God to society and the world, you got to start close at home, right? So now you may not want to choose the most difficult one. You might want to choose one that you think, you got a good chance of breaking through in. Or you might want to go ahead and shoot for the hardest one and say, hey, this year I need to reopen my relationship with this person. Okay? And I'm telling you, by doing that, you are comforting the heart of God. Because it is through you that God can continue to express his love for others. So if there is a person that you're having trouble with, or that you feel you need to work on, and again, I know it's not easy. So next week we're going to talk about dealing with doubt and some strategies on how to deal with it. But first, think about it. Who does God want me to break through in my relationship with? Who would God be so inspired for me to build a relationship with this year? Think of a person, okay? This is the second area. Multiply this God's love for people. And finally, have dominion. I gave some examples already, but maybe having dominion includes, managing your budget this year. Or maybe it means doing that trip to the Adirondacks. Or maybe it's, saving up to a trip to Hawaii and seeing the stars. Actually, I think a couple of years ago, I had a chance for for my anniversary with my wife, I think 20th anniversary. We went to Hawaii for a 7-day trip. And one of the things that we did was we went to Kona, and there's it's kind of like a whole mountain. So in the middle of the night, we drove to the top or the middle of the island. And we got out of the car. It was all stars. Like, there were no other lights, so you could literally if this is you're at the top of the mountain, so if this is a plane, around me, 360 degrees, all stars. And that was inspiring in itself, but what was more inspiring to me was to watch my wife's expression, how excited she was. I wasn't as excited. I was like, stars are stars, right? But I've seen those before from my house, right? But no, for her, it was just like her eyes were sparkling. And I was like, wow, she's really excited about this. And I felt this kind of joy of just seeing her excited to see this, that, wow, this is how God must be feeling when we engage with nature in that way. So anyway, the dominion, maybe in order to prepare for that trip, you got to get your own finances in order. Okay, so maybe that's your goal. Or maybe you want to get to a point of financial stability where you can make a substantial donation, like for the Chongwon-gung project in Korea. Or maybe you want to catch up on your tithe. Whatever it is, the more you get clear on this area, the more you're going to be able to experience the joy and all of creation and fulfill your potential. God gave you the ability. And if you think like you're not good with numbers, then find someone who is. There's always a way to achieve these things. Okay? God designed us that way. Okay, now set a goal in each area. So for example, I said, I'm committed to completing the EDP 1-hour manual, reading it 100 times this year. Relationships, I'm working on spending a little bit more time with my parents, helping my mom be more independent in her care for my dad. And one exciting thing that I'm working on in this third area of co-creation is this Achieve Coach Training program that I'm working on. Oh yeah, final thing about the third blessing, it's not just about money or nature. It's about exercising your creativity. this is a key aspect of the third blessing, is your co-creativity that God gave us, find a way to express it. So for me, that's like a training program. Okay, in summary, we're wrapping up here. It's a little long. So a dream is a cherished aspiration, ambition, or ideal. God's dream is for each of us to fulfill our three great blessings and establish an ideal world. And third, by setting goals in line with three great blessings, we can grow towards our original potential and simultaneously bring joy to God. So reflection for this right after service is, what's one goal you're excited to achieve in 2023? The challenge is to share that goal, or if you have more than one goal, share that with 3 others this week. And today was God's dream and mine or yours. Next week, I mentioned already, dealing with doubt. We're going to go into really how do you overcome the different challenges that come as soon as you set goals. And finally, on the 29th, as I mentioned, there is a vision casting service. It's going to be really exciting on the 29th. So in conclusion, it's a new year, 2023, and I really want each of you to have a great year. And it starts with gaining clarity on what's really important. And the bonus is to line it up with God's design for you, right? And if we have those clear goals, we can really make sure that this year is going to be the best year that we have yet. So let's do that. May God bless you and your family this week. Thank you very much.